Keir Starmer, you're calling for a general election. Why?
Because we've got a clear choice. We either carry on with this utter chaos, and it is utter chaos, there's nobody who uses any other word, or we have the stability of a Labour government coming in, stabilising the economy with a credible plan for the future. Andrew, this, there's some sense in some quarters this is just a sort of soap opera in the Tory party. It's not. It's doing huge damage to our economy and to our reputation, and the public are paying the price for it, and they're entitled to a choice, and not just a revolving door, the next chaos, or who do we next want up for the experiment at the top of the Tory party. There is an alternative. Put that before the public. Let them make their choice.
You've said the Labour Party are the stable alternative. There is a £70 billion hole in the public finances as the result of recent events. Day one, what do you do to start to deal with that?
Well, some of the ways in which we deal with that we've already laid out. So we've been saying for a long time now there should be a windfall tax on oil and gas companies made excess profits. That would go, a considerable way to dealing with the price of the energy freeze that's obviously now 6 months rather than 2 years. So there are things, the non-dom status we've said we would abolish. There are things we've laid out already.
So there are some specific tax increases. Do you think that you could handle this crisis without making spending cuts?
I'm very conscious of the fact that until the last few weeks, nobody was discussing spending cuts. If I'd been doing your programme a month ago, we wouldn't have had a discussion about spending cuts. They're a direct result of that kamikaze budget. Now, I ran a public service for 5 years during a period where we took spending cuts, and I know what that feels like, and I know that there aren't many public services that can take much more by way of spending cuts. So I'm not going to go down that route. I do accept, and I have been saying, I said it at a conference, and I said it earlier this week, that it may mean for an incoming Labour government that we can't do everything we want to do as quickly as we might like.
Do you know in your own mind what you'll pause, as it were, or delay?
Well, obviously, we don't know the economy that we'll inherit. We don't know when that election will be, and therefore I'm not going to set out now what that may be. But I do want to level with people and with my own party and with the public that I wouldn't go for austerity, but I recognise that they're going to leave such a mess in terms of the finances that good Labour things that we want to do, we may have to do more slowly than we'd intended.
But you can't rule out some kind of efficiencies or moderate cuts in public spending, because you're going to inherit an economic position much worse than Harold Wilson did in 1964, much worse, much worse than Tony Blair did in 1997. And this is going to be in a completely new territory, isn't it?
Well, they are going to leave absolute chaos when it comes to the economy. They've done huge damage to it. And we'll obviously have to look at what that looks like when there is the election. And as I say, that means we won't be able to do some of the things we'd like to do as quickly as we would like to. But as I say, having run our public services, I say they're on their knees. Everybody who works in a public service says, no, they're on their face. I know what efficiencies mean. I know what back office efficiencies mean. A lot of that was done when I was running a public service. It's very difficult to take much more out of our public services and to deliver a public service.
If it came to it, tax rises on those with the broadest shoulders rather than further public spending cuts.
I want a fair taxation system, and that's why we've said, and we were critical of the government for what it was going to do on corporation tax. And no business, by the way, is coming to me saying the problem here is corporation tax. They're saying the problem here is we've got no stability, we've got no certainty, we can't make investment decisions. We want to partner with the government, but there isn't a grown-up government to partner with.
Now, talking of grown-up, we're in a very fast-moving situation this evening, but there are very credible reports that Boris Johnson is throwing his hat back in the ring and would like to return. What would be your message to Boris Johnson if he is planning a return to the top?
Well, I remember it was 3 months ago that he resigned, just about, and he resigned because his own front bench, his own party, had declared that he was unfit for office. There were dozens of resignations coming in over a period of days, and they all said the same thing.
But they found someone unfitter.
But it wasn't a policy issue. That they didn't say to Boris Johnson. And Theresa May, for example, who I've got a lot of regard for, respect for. I knew her when she was Home Secretary and I was Director of Public Prosecutions. That was a policy issue that she couldn't resolve. With him, it was character. They decided that he was unfit for office. So, Andrew, the idea of an experiment over the last few weeks with Liz Truss, which has cost people additional mortgage payments in hundreds of pounds every month, cost our economy, cost our reputation. The idea that you go from that economic chaos back to a man who I always said he was unfit for office, but his own party said he's unfit for office. So now the idea that you go from this carnage, this chaos, back to a man who's unfit for office. I mean, if ever there was an argument for a general election, that has to be it.
So Boris Johnson, I think he's still on holiday, thinking, what am I going to do next? What is your direct message to him? Stay out of this.
I would invite him to dust off and reread all the resignation letters that he received in July, because all of his colleagues wrote saying how unfit he was for office and they couldn't serve him any longer. And I think they should all dust them off and reread them as well.
Now, whoever they choose, there's a huge range of public spending cuts and tax increases being looked at by Jeremy Hunt. Those have to get through the House of Commons. You call for an election. Of course, if you're a Tory MP, that looks like political suicide, and they're unlikely to vote for that. So are you expecting some kind of breakdown in the House of Commons leading to an election over the course of this winter or early next year? Is that what you think is going to happen?
Andrew, you'll have been talking to Tory MPs. I think many of them are despairing. Many of them feel that it's time their party went into opposition and healed its wounds. And so the choice for them is simple. Are you going to put your party first, or are you going to put the country first? And if they put the country first, we'd have a general election. But we're in unprecedented times. We've burnt through, 4 chancellors, 2 or 3 home secretaries, 3 or 4 prime ministers. This is unprecedented. And so there is this just clear choice: carry on with this utter chaos, or have the stability of an incoming Labour government. And the public come up to me as I go around. I was in Brighton this morning, and I got the very, very strong sense that they feel this is embarrassing, it's a mess, it's chaos, it's costing them, and they're saying, why shouldn't I have a say in what happens next?
Finally, 44 days as Prime Minister, the winter queen, as it were. Liz Truss has had, by any standards, a pretty miserable time. At a human level, how would you write her political obituary?
It's a failure. It was an experiment that should never have been carried out on the British public and has cost us dearly. On a human level, I've got no ill will towards her. She's obviously
you feel sorry for her?
She's under huge strain, and I'm on a human level. I wouldn't want to see that in anyone. But I would gently point out that for millions of people who can't pay their bills this winter, for millions of people who can't actually afford £200 or £300, £400, £500 more on their mortgage payments, they're under huge strain as well. And forgive me if I speak for them.
Sir Keir Starmer, it's been a busy and extraordinary day. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.